All right, so Piastri had a fantastic lap where the McLaren looks grounded as usual because it's a car that has good ride quality and good balance and stable downforce. And he comes P1 in free practice 2, where we're looking at the qualifying, the race pace testing. Now he's followed by, of course, no surprise, Mercedes, who are beginning to shed their sandbagging, followed by Antonelli, who's about a tenth of a second, 2/10 of a second behind him, followed by Russell, who's about 2 to 3/10 of a second behind. Then we have, I believe it's Hamilton and Leclerc in the Ferrari car, which we would think would be at least as fast, if not faster than McLaren over one lap. They were about 3 to 4/10 behind. And then we have Verstappen, 5/10 of a second, and Norris. Now, what we want to say from the get-go is that probably Mercedes is still sandbagging here and should be fighting, the Mercedes drivers should be fighting Piastri and Norris for qualifying. And I'm still going to say that Russell's going to get qualifying. Is going to get qualifying in the main race later on. I'll give my reasons for that. Something else to note is that as fast as the Ferrari is, having a good turbo to weight ratio and probably has more intrinsic one lap pace than any car on the grid, they were struggling today, and it's not surprising because even through testing, we saw that they have a lot of downforce in the corners. After they've changed their front suspension style, they have a lot more grip, acceleration, power, torque coming off of the corners, but they have extreme tire drag. And more importantly, which I think is one of the reasons they're a little bit behind Mercedes and McLaren coming into this weekend in one lap pace, is that they have snap and oversteer and understeer due to the fact that even though the car has a lot of downforce, it lacks stability and also lacks front to end balance. It's slightly pointy, and also for whatever reason, with the setup of the front suspension, it just lacks an overall balance, even though it has the most downforce and raw speed. So that's going to affect them. So basically, they have handling issues. This is the same issue that Red Bull has with Max Verstappen, which is why he came in sixth fastest today, despite having by almost, I think it's almost, I don't want to exaggerate, but I think I saw that he had 346 kilometers on the straight compared to 336 by McLaren. So he has a lot more pace. He also has less clipping and an aggressive downshifting style, which gives him more speed into the corners and coming and on the straight. But he's losing too much time due to the instability of the car. Once again, for reasons similar to Ferrari, we know that Verstappen likes a pointy car. We know that he also likes a loose rear end. And no matter how much speed you have or how much downforce you have, coming into corners with that type of setup can sometimes lead to instability, especially through the corners. And we saw that with Verstappen. Another issue that Red Bull has been having with Verstappen that they saw at Bahrain is that the car has a lot of sliding. This is an issue that's been haunting Red Bull for the past 2 or 3 years, even through different genres of specifications for car. So it's still haunting them. And I think this is a systemic issue based on the types of cars that Verstappen likes with loose rear ends and pointiness, so that there's just naturally a front to end problem. And they never have been able to manage to figure out how to deal with suspension and stability, get mechanical grip through those things the way that Mercedes and McLaren do have. So that's going to be a problem. I'm going to argue later on in this show that even though Verstappen's coming sixth now, and even though he's using a style of transitioning rather than using the software to do lift and coast, he's aggressively downshifting to get a more radical harvesting to get higher top speeds. Even though that makes him unstable, we know how Red Bull does. They're going to work all week on stability, on finding the right setup, and still going through the extremes of clipping the wings and everything to get as much speed as possible so that he can try to be the hare, to try to get a good qualifying time, jump out in front of people, and have a setup that allows him to have high entry speed into the corners and a lot of speed on the straights and dare the others to catch him if he can get pulled, because we know that that type of setup will lead to a lot of imbalance relative to McLaren and Mercedes. But if it's stable enough for him to come out first in P1, he can drive smoother, use less of the downshifting, and rely on the fact that he has a lot more speed on the straights, especially in this era where they could be clicking on the straights. He could get a lead, and then through his exceptional racecraft and his exceptional tire management, along with the fact that he'll have more speed on the straights, it'll be more difficult for people to pass him. But as usual, that's a game of working with his team all the way from free practice 1, free practice 2, free practice 3, up until the race to get the right setup. So we know Red Bull is a gambling, but I think that they should gamble because they don't have the same engine advantages that the Mercedes team and its customers have. So Max might as well do this kamikaze style and hope he gets it right. We're also going to look at the fact that Norris is struggling relative to Piastri, who has the fastest time. A lot of this may be, Norris is still learning early in the week, the track, and he'll probably nail it and challenge for pole. But there's a good chance that Piastri could beat him out and might even get pole, even though, once again, I said I think Mercedes will get it. But I think one of the reasons Piastri is dominating right now and going a little bit faster than Norris is that Piastri is a very smooth driver. He tends to, when he's approaching a track, he tends to go in smoother, slower approach. What I mean by slow approach is that he tends to, even though he brakes late, he tends to measure his entry into the corners, whereas Norris likes to go in gung-ho and brake late and hard, but would be less stable than Piastri. And Piastri goes for a higher speed at the apex by gradually building up, going into the corners. And what Piastri does is manages a lap, whereas Norris is more instinctive and goes with the fact that he has better feel for grip, so he can feel where the limits of adhesion are and stop and push it to the limits. Piastri doesn't do that, and that helped him during free practice 2 with the qualifying sims, in that he was managing the system of the car, the energy systems, very well, where we saw that he was clipping earlier and therefore revving harder earlier, and he was also lifting earlier from the throttle. And the reason he's doing that is to get more harvesting going into the corners, because when you're clipping earlier, that's when you're charging the battery and getting it to get speed through the corners and into the straights. But what you lose is that on the straight, as you approach the corners, you have less entry speed. So let's look at the first thing he was doing. And he set his software up to do this and managed it very well. The software starts to rev earlier than usual, which is to charge the battery. And then at the point at which he lifts off of the car, the aerodynamics of the car and the momentum charges. So if he's clipping earlier, he's losing more speed on the straight, but he's doing that to get more of a boost in the corners. And then when he lifts earlier, once again, he's even getting less speed. But what he's doing, and the car is still revving and charging the battery for that boost. And it might look like, he's going slow, but he gets a lot more speed into the corners. And also by doing everything earlier, by charging the battery earlier and slowing down and clipping, what he's doing is getting a gradual approach into the corners, which gives him more stability through the corners because he comes into the corners easily. And that's what he was doing even before the 50-50 hybrid split. His entry is not as aggressive as drivers like Leclerc, Verstappen, and Norris. It's a little bit more like Russell, whereas Russell's a sort of hybrid too. Russell likes to have a smooth entry and likes to keep everything smooth and stable throughout. Guys like Verstappen, Leclerc, and Norris are very abrupt, very hard on the car, and tend to make more mistakes than guys like Piastri and Russell, who are smoother, but they tend to have more raw speed. So what we saw with Piastri, with this great lap that he had in FP2, was that he timed everything perfectly, smooth inputs and everything, and he had a lot more stability. Like I said, he might have been having a top speed of 332 kilometers per hour, whereas Verstappen's was 346. But where Verstappen lost time was in stability going through the corners and through snap. Piastri had none of that. So in short, what he's doing is a gentler buildup, But while he's doing that gentle buildup, now he has the car harvesting to give him more momentum through the corners. In the old regs, he would have a gentle, he would go in gently and gain time through to the smoothness. But now, not only the smoothness, there's the boost from the energy. So he's doing very well at timing his harvesting. And we saw that Norris, on the other hand, was using more of the style that Verstappen does, where he's aggressive with his downshifting, aggressive with his brake use, probably getting a little bit more straight line speed, but once again, making more errors in the corner due to instability. Now, at this point, though, I want to go back to Ferrari. Ferrari, during the Bahrain testing, was generally the fastest over a lap and actually had the fastest race pace, but a lot of people believe that the best race pace was really McLaren, if you judge for the fact that they were doing long endurance runs, so they weren't showing their full pace during the race and had better tire drag. And this is beginning to be, the prophecy has come to light here, in which we see that they're having problems with stability on the corner. And there's no doubt that they're still going to have problems with tire wear based on their front suspension setup. So they're doing a lot better than last year, but they don't have the stability that McLaren has. And once again, we want to go back to what made McLaren a world champion team, a constructors team that won 2 constructors and won the championship with Russell dethroning Verstappen, is that whereas other teams focus on aerodynamics, on engine power, or on things like that, on downforce, what McLaren focuses on with their guru, their engineer guru, their design guru, Rob Marshall, is they focus on ride stability. They focus on mechanical grip. They focus on subtle suspension parts so that the suspension is very good. They focus on absolute balance. They focus on not focusing on any one track to be best on, but to do better as a whole on all tracks, even though on some tracks other teams will be better than them. And all of that goes to their anti-dive, which keeps the car stable over chicanes and bumps, and it just goes to the overall mechanical grip they have and the efficiency and the extremely good tire drag that they have. So, and we're seeing that again because Mercedes and Ferrari are faster inherently over one lap than McLaren. But when you see this type of smooth one lap performance that Piastri did, you see that all of the time is based on stability through the corners, and the stability through the corners equals a higher apex speed, and it equals more speed coming off of the corners. All of this is due to the fact of the stability bringing out more of the inherent speed in the car, whereas Mercedes and Ferrari, which have more peak performative pace, were struggling with stability in the corners. Now, I'll take that back. Actually, Mercedes is not struggling with stability. Ferrari is, and Red Bull is. What Mercedes' problems might be right now are more of reliability. But when we look at the times, so I apologize for that. They're not unstable. They're pretty stable. They're probably not as stable to the extreme as McLaren, but they have a lot better aero efficiency and almost equal stability. But where they're struggling now is more of a reliability issue. And also, once again, I think that they're sandbagging, because if you look at the times, what's his name? Antonelli was 0.2 of a second behind Piastri in qualifying pace during free practice 2, and Russell was about 0.3. But Russell was on a heavy fuel load and wasn't really doing qualifying sims. He was doing long pace stuff, which means he was holding back. So we haven't seen his full pace. And I get a sense that he'll probably outpace the McLarens, especially Piastri, probably by 0.5 to 1/10, because he hasn't shown his full pace. It's not that he was sandbagging, it's that he was on a different program from the rest of the people, looking for reliability, trying to get deltas, trying to get consistent lap times and everything, and building on what we know Mercedes is good for, distributing energy through a 52-lap race. So he was building on working their energy systems so that they're not focusing on short burst or maybe even one stint. They're looking for performance over multiple stints. So he wasn't putting forward his representative one-lap pace. Now I want to go back to Piastri, because what Piastri was doing was going into, what he does is building into corner 1 with the flying lap. he clips early and lifts early, and it may look like, oh, he's not going into the corner fast, but that sets him up for corners 3 and 6, which are sort of high-speed corners. It sets him up for that. And by the time he comes off of those corners, he's at a very, very high top speed. And that momentum carries him all the way to 9 to 10, and then starting all over again. So what he was basically doing was lifting and coasting and clipping to slow down and store energy for the entry. So he has a lot of speed in entry 1. And then he would lift and coast again for 3 and 6, which are high speed, and then have a lot of speed through those high speed corners. And then that high speed will give him the momentum to go all the way around until you get back to 12 and 13 and then back into 1. So what he was doing was harvesting his energy and doing a great lap. Now, Verstappen was the opposite. Verstappen would go all out, hit the throttle, and he would brake. He would use downshifting to brake late into the corners, carrying a lot of speed into the corners, slow down into the corners. This is usually his strategy. Not slow down, but lose momentum going into the corners. But that aggressive downshifting gives him harvesting so that he now starts to have a boost on the straight and reaches a high top speed. So it's different strategies. Norris's strategy is very good for getting speed through the corners and everything, but he's not Norris, Piastri. But what you're going to see with McLaren is they're going to run out of pace at the midway through the straights, and this is where Verstappen's going to have a ton of pace. And if he's anywhere close to them, either if he's leading them, they're not going to be able to pass him, or he's going to be able to pass them on the corners. But the problem is that his style is so aggressive, and the Red Bull car has such a lack of balance that they're losing too much time on the corners. But my theory here is, as usual, what Verstappen is going to do is try to find a setup to give him as much stability as he can, and then do a kamikaze 1 lap in qualifying. And if he does that, put his car into parc ferme. And then what's going to happen is that because his car has so much straight line speed, if he's in P1 and with as much straight line speed as that has, and hitting 340, actually it's 340 something. Also, Gasly had 340 something too. So with that much straight line pace, if he comes Q1, if he comes P1 in qualifying, nobody's going to be able to catch him. And also, if he comes P2, P3 and can nail the start, also with that type of momentum he has, and with the way he's able to nurse his tires and strategize, he'll come back. So what I'm trying to say is that even though Verstappen was P6 in FP2 for 1 lap pace, people should be afraid, because he is actually manually manipulating that car to have a more aggressive, peak performative style of driving, which will pull through if he can just figure out how to have more stability through the corners. Whereas we see with McLaren, and especially Piastri, is the antithesis. It's smoother entry, less aggression, less extreme charging, which will give less boosts. Because what happens is when Max is downshifting, he's going into ultra revs, which gives him even more power harvested. But what they're doing is economizing their power distribution, because they can get away with it because of their balance, which gives them more speed during the corner. But all of this comes to a head and equals out, because whereas they may have more efficiency, more balance and everything else, for the Red Bull has more peak performance. And if they can just hold on with their stability, a lot more power and not more power, but a lot more acceleration and top speed. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. My prediction is that Max is probably not going to be able to pull it out this week. Maybe as the weeks go on and they try to figure out what's causing the slide in his car, he's going to be very competitive and can compete for a chance at the championship. Only if it's not the case that Mercedes is seriously sandbagging, especially with Russell, in which case Max will be fighting Piastri and Norris and Antonelli for number 2 in the Drivers' Championship this year. All right, thank you for watching Formula One Fanatics. We want you to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us as we follow this season. Thank you.